So first of all, I'm going to wind the clock back. We're going to go back about 140 years, 130 years anyway, to Theodore Roosevelt. He was number 26, the 26th president, and he was in office from 1901 to 1909. Now, he wrote about Bigfoot, and I'm sure that many of you know about this. And this was in his 1892 book called The Wilderness Hunter. So Roosevelt writes that the creature was regarded as a half-human, half-devil, or half-goblin beast, and the men encountered what they believed to be a Bigfoot, a North American Sasquatch, or great wood ape. So he repeats in his book a story by a trapper called Bauman. So in the late 1800s, Bauman and a companion decided to set traps on a trail near Montana Wisdom River. The remote trail had an evil reputation, and another trapper had been found half-eaten by mining prospectors along this path. So they then discovered that the creature had destroyed their campsite the next day upon returning to the camp, as if out of contempt for their shooting at it the night before. The creature was nowhere in sight, but it left many visible tracks during its fit of rage while destroying their camp. And Bauman, he was awakened at midnight to a foul, Wild West odour. He saw what was described as a great body in the distance, lurking in the shadows. He stood up and fired a shot from his rifle. The thing rushed away, making a loud noise as it fled. The incident shook the two men, and they didn't sleep much for the rest of that night. So by the campfire, the two highly experienced trappers determined together that the tracks that they had inspected under torchlit view were not made by either a human or a bear. So they went to collect their traps and go back to the camp to retire. Bauman returned to camp himself to find a horrible sight. There he found his friend's dead body. His neck was snapped, and there were 4 fang marks in his companion's neck. So what were probably bite marks, they've managed to make it sound like it was Count Dracula by making sure it was fangs. So we can discard the sort of exaggeration. That's from 1892, that statement was made. So let's move forward to Harry Truman, the 33rd president. Probably he had the most difficult tenure, really, that any president has ever had. He had to make decisions on the Manhattan Project, which resulted in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I believe that played on his mind for the rest of his life, as it would any normal human being. So given what we know now, people think a different decision should have been made. Personally, I don't think we can rewrite history. They had to go with what they had and what they knew at that particular time. So revisioning history doesn't work for me or anybody. It doesn't serve any purpose. So Truman was also in receipt of knowledge of aliens or off-planet visitors. when we do nuclear tests, whether it's at such places as Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean, or Woomera in South Australia, or Trinity in the White Sands Proving Grounds, or even in the Nevada desert, when we explode these nuclear devices, we make this planet ring like a bell, and the shock waves seemingly go right through the galaxy, probably right through the universe. So if you were a being living on a different planet, you might think, what in the hell is going on at planet Earth? So perhaps you would send scouts in craft to observe and realise that the idiots, the humans, have now got their finger on the nuclear button. So to be honest, I'm going to show you some images in this while we're talking about this. The bombs, the size of the bombs, and the images that we see, they really make me shudder. They really do. It's unbelievable. It's really quite frightening. So I wonder how many of the soldiers that were present at those tests had cancers as a result of the radiation. I just wonder. So it is after these tests that off-planet alien activity really starts to ramp up. I know that the Egyptians painted on their hieroglyphs, they painted the alien beings coming in, and I know that on Native American petroglyphs, they're visible there as well. But this whole thing really, really ramps up. So let's move forward onto another president. To the 34th president, Dwight Eisenhower. And he's number 34. So much of what happens under his tenure has laid the ground for today. So if you just look at all the info posted on papers that relate to his time in office, it's fascinating. So there's been quite a lot to sit on and deny for 70 years, but various governments have done that quite successfully. So no wonder we don't believe an official world that we are told. So Eisenhower was on a golf vacation in Palm Springs on February the 20th, 1954. After dinner that night, he made an unscheduled departure from the Smoking Tree Ranch, where he was presently staying. So also that morning, his spokesperson, I nearly said smokesperson, Freudian slip there, his spokesperson announced to the press that he had visited a dentist the previous night because he'd chipped a tooth while eating a chicken wing at dinner. So obviously there has been lots of reason to call this out. And it's interesting why people would do that. So there are one or two witnesses that attest to what occurred on that evening, and one of them is this Professor Sala, who's in the University of Queensland. And I'll read to you what he says occurred. He doesn't believe a word of this. He figures the dentist trip is just a cover story. He believes that Ike went to Edwards Air Force Base, where he met with two ETs with white hair, pale blue eyes, and colourless lips. Now, these aliens, they nicknamed Nordics, and in UFO circles, this is because they resemble Scandinavian humans. So these aliens travelled to Edwards Air Force Base from another solar system in a flying saucer, and they had a meeting with Eisenhower. I should say that when I refer to him as Ike, Ike is Eisenhower's nickname. I'm only giving that explanation. Most of you will know that, but for younger viewers, you might not. So there was a telepathic communication. It's as though you're hearing a person, but they're not speaking. and the Nordics offered to share their superior technology and their wisdom with Ike and the world, planet Earth, if he would agree to eliminate America's nuclear weapons. So the way that speech is heard is the way we would hear mine speak. So they were afraid. The Nordics were afraid we might blow up some of our nuclear technology, and that does something, apparently, to time and space, and impacts on extraterrestrial races on other planets. So they know every time we have a little explosion, because it upsets all of their energy and the way they operate. So Ike declined the ET's offer because he just didn't want to give up the nukes. Well, no one is going to leave themselves without any kind of defense. So sometime later in 1954, Ike reached a deal with another race of extraterrestrials known as the Greys, allowing them, listen to this, allowing them to capture earthling cattle and humans for medical experiments, provided that they returned the humans safely home. Now the cattle have clearly been discarded because we see what's going on with the cattle on Skinwalker and on the Bradshaw Ranch. The humans, we have no idea what happens with them. So President Eisenhower met with the aliens and a formal treaty between the alien nation and the United States of America was signed. We then received our first alien ambassador from outer space. This is where we start going into the woo. His name and title was His Omnipotent Highness Krull, pronounced Krill. So he was very rudely referred to in private by the Americans as Original Hostage Krill. So the alien flag is known as the trilateral insignia, and it's displayed on their craft and worn on their uniforms. This meeting was filmed, and the film still exists today. So I wonder if we're going to see that. So we're going to move forward now to 1976, to Jimmy Carter, who is the 39th president. One of his promises he made on his election platform was saying that he wanted to get to the bottom of the UFO stuff, and he was advised against this by the head of the alphabets that begins with C. I'm not going to mention them, you know who I mean. So the man who became the head of a committee called Majestic 12 then became the 41st president, George H.W. Bush Sr. So there is actual footage when Jimmy Carter takes office, and he's been inaugurated, and he's been taken off into a little side room, given the vital information about security, world security, American security. And then they fast forward to him coming back into the Oval Office, and he sits at his desk, and he looks a dejected man. He looks absolutely shattered. So apparently this footage was taken immediately after the alien and UFO situation has been disclosed to him by Mr. Bush. So the conversation that George Bush, as head of MJ12, puts to President Carter is simple. And I'm going to paraphrase it in my own version of events, but in a small sentence it was, "We are not in charge. They are in charge." So I'm just going to read you an excerpt that would have been disclosed to Jimmy Carter, and it was established at the Eisenhower Summit in 1955, which gives you an idea of why he couldn't proceed with disclosing everything that he wanted to about UFOs and aliens. So the treaty stated that the aliens would not interfere in our affairs, and we would not interfere in theirs. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret, and they would furnish us with advanced technology and would help us in our technological development. They would not make any treaty with any other Earth nation. They were going to be allowed to abduct humans on a limited and periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development, with the stipulation that the humans would not be harmed. They would be returned to their point of abduction, and that the humans would have no memory of the event, and that the alien nation would furnish MJ-12 a list of all human contacts and abductees on a regular scheduled basis. So it was agreed that each nation would receive the ambassador of the other for as long as the treaty remained in force. It was further agreed that the alien nation and the United States would exchange 16 personnel, each to the other, with the purpose of learning all about each other. So underground bases, let's move on to that. The alien guests would remain on Earth, and the human guests would travel to the alien point of origin for a specified period of time, then return, at which point a reverse exchange would be made. It was also agreed that bases would be constructed underground for the use of the alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for the joint use of the alien nation and the United States government. So there's going to be an exchange of technology which would take place on the occupied bases. The alien bases would then be constructed under Indian reservations. What a bloody cheek. Under Indian reservations. And one would be constructed in Nevada in an area known as S4, which is approximately 7 miles south of the western border of Area 51. So those of you who have listened to Charles Hall's depositions, he makes mention of this. It's totally off limits to human beings. Nobody can go there. And it was built specifically for off-planet. So people's stories are beginning to corroborate. They're beginning to tally with each other. They're overlapping. So this is where I decide on whether it's fact or fiction. And I believe that there's truth in these. Then we're going to move to the president from the state of AR. Number 42. And it's interesting because much of what we see happening to number 45 happened to him in a more subtle way with the Star Report, but nothing stuck to number 42. So you can see that I'm not mentioning his name. If you do use his name on this platform, it seems to ping bells in certain areas. He seems to be untouchable, unspeakable. Much of a case in the United Kingdom you may or may not have heard of. It's really around Prince Andrew and a now mysteriously dead Mr. J.E., another person whose name cannot be mentioned. For what reasons I do not know, but they have very, very interesting links to number 42. And for some reason, 42 is fireproof. I don't know why. So no presidents have gone down this disclosure route, really. It's probably a vote loser. And I'm not sure why the Congress subcommittee on July 26th of this year decided to proceed with a limited parameter disclosure, since they have been spending millions over decades hiding this information and lying about the existence of aliens. People have disappeared that spoke openly about these events, and I'm thinking of a particular man called Forrest in the mid-50s who was not happy with the Truman government secrecy and miraculously tied a sheet around his own neck and managed to fall out of a window to his death. Accidents happen. So I doubt that it was with the full cognizant approval of the present incumbent, number 46. I doubt any of these disclosures have been with his approval or because it's a subject he's interested in. So it all leads me to something else, which we call, or is called, the censorship industrial complex. So have you ever heard of that? And if you have not, it's well worth having a look at. I'm going to put up something on the screen here while I'm talking to it. They're trying through various organizations, well-known organizations, to get freedom of speech shut down. So those people who have been saying for years and years that they have seen Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and the minute they say it, their jobs are at risk, or they get this stupid nonsense about you've seen a bear, like you've never seen a bear in your life before. And it's almost taking us back to the era of McCarthyism, when nobody was allowed to have an opinion that was left of centre. So if you just look at all the organisations on this censorship industrial complex, these people are all trying to alter your perception. They're trying to influence you. So if we start on the top left, you've got government. I expect the government to do that. They have things to hide, things that shouldn't be made public. I understand that, and I expect that. But there are some things that should be made public. Then we've got foundations. Now, all of these foundations, when you start looking at them, you have a good look at those. Well, no. They're trying to influence how you think. Big tech, all the stuff we use for uploading, using our phones on the computer, they're all in on this. And I've just mentioned it with the platform we use. The people whose names that cannot be mentioned. That's telling us how we can think, what we can think of, what opinion we must form. So the NGOs, we do know that a lot of foreign policy money for foreign aid goes to NGOs, most of which is absolutely legitimate. But I'm quite certain there is some of it which goes to organisation where people are placed, and that's how we get information, you know. So I understand that. But to have these organisations telling us how we should think, what we should push for, and it's a bit much. And then there's the fact checkers. Well, that's just hilarious. Fact checkers trying to influence the way we think. That is really one thing pulling at another. The worst of these organisations are think tanks. See, like the Aspen Institute and people like that, they are trying to shut down freedom of speech. So you need to look at these organisations more carefully. See how they're getting involved in things. Academic initiatives, how you educate your friends, your family. And then there's for-profit. Well, they're the only honest ones about them. They're saying, well, we're doing this for money, so we want something out of it. It's worth looking at censorship industrial complex, and then we might understand a little bit of why we're being led up the garden path, why certain things are being hidden from us, and why we're being educated to think in one way or another. And I'll leave that up to you. So I hope you found that interesting. There is quite a lot to go at in that. And what brought it on really, I suppose, is the disclosures in July. There's no reason why, if people keep pushing their government representatives, they won't come out with what they know eventually about Sasquatch. I believe the reason why they don't is there's something more going on. They're not quite as flesh and blood as we think. I think they've got a lot of capabilities which were well beyond our ken. And what may come out of it all is that they discover that animals have far more senses than we give them credit for, and actually they're probably superior beings to us. They can't invent stuff, but I think that they have a lot more energetic capabilities. I certainly feel that the Shanu people do. I think they are quite capable of being visible or being non-visible. And when I say non-visible, they may be in front of us, but because we have certain types of vision, we are not tetrachromats, we just have a certain type of vision, we're unable to see them, but they're right in front of our face. Yet animals can see them. So we need to push the people, the powers that be, and say, stop lying to us. We want to know what happened up in the Cascades. We want to know what happens in the big thicket. We know it happens. Don't treat us like idiots. They're probably just leaving it to the general public because there's so many channels like this out there who are talking about it. So they don't have to, they probably feel, oh, we're off the hook. We don't have to discuss it. That's just maybe. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming to this channel. It can't be done without you. Have a great day. Have a great week.